I'll show you these now.
Oh, hi everybody. We're just laughing at the crescendo and the dramatic music played in the background. We're just admitting a few more people in. You might get a message which says, now what will it say? It will say, are you okay with it recording? That's purely to help us with the people that aren't here tonight. So, oh, there we are. Here we are. This is the Year 6 team, if you don't know us. I'm Mrs. Walls. This is
Hello.
and
Miss Floor.
and that's something we didn't do this morning. It's lovely to see you all. Let's just talk about a bit of housekeeping before we start. And the housekeeping is this. Whilst you're on, if you can have your cameras on, that's great. If you don't want them on because it's being recorded, we absolutely get that. It's no problem. Could you have your mics on mute? Because sometimes if there's a background noise, it distorts our voices. And I mean, the point of this evening is trying to understand what the children are about to go through with their SATs. And another thing is, if you've got something to ask a question, could it keep to the end? There is no question that's a silly question at all. And if you've got a critique, please be kind in your critique. We're humans after all. But I'm sure if something you don't agree with we say tonight, please come to us personally. Dojo, come to the door. Our doors are always open and we'll talk to you there. So I hope that's okay with everyone. It's lovely to see you all. I can see some familiar faces. So let's get on with the show. Oh my gosh, that was not intentional. Okay. Right. So if we look about the SATs, what are the SATs? They are a test. Now, common misconception of this is that it's the end of year 6 test. It's not at all. It is an end of key stage test. So the children will be faced with questions that they've been doing even in year 2. So some of the spelling patterns they did in year 2 will be up in our spelling test. All of that is accumulating. So basically year 6, what we should be doing, which because of COVID we're not doing, is if you think of the analogy of baking a cake, we should be just putting the cherry on top of that cake because they'll have gained all that knowledge throughout key stage 2. But at the moment, and the reason why we're having Easter school is because there are some gaps in learning, which is to be completely understandable. It's in every school and it's in every high school and then any educational environment. So let me just have a look. I think there's someone in the waiting room. With that in mind, if you have been invited to Easter school, so it's invitation only, it sounds like a party, please take up that opportunity. It is a gift in terms of there will be the year 6 team that will be facilitating the extra tuition. It will be in a small group and it will be really intensified. And it's not just for SATs. When we say intensified, that sounds horrific. It will just be really precision teaching. It's not just for SATs, it's to get them prepared for their next stage, for key stage 3, where the demands are greater. When you think about the technical vocabulary that they're going to have to learn, all the different subjects like science, geography, maths, all of those take the step up. The new GCSEs are harder than the old GCSEs. You might have heard of the grades from 1 to 9. So it's more of a mastery of learning. So coming to the Easter school really benefits not just for the SATs, it's for tuition for the next steps. So this year, the SATs are they start on a Tuesday, and that's because of the King's coronation, which has never been done before. We usually have this back on the Monday. So on the Tuesday the 9th, we've got the English grammar, punctuation and spelling. On Wednesday the 10th, we've got English reading. Then the Thursday, we have maths papers 1 and 2, and the Friday, we have maths paper 3. That's a busy week. It's a full-on week for them, and we just try to prepare them as much as we can. That because it is a test where we haven't set it, we don't know what's on it. We can surmise what's going to be on it. We can prepare them as much as possible, but we get to open that paper when the children are in front of us on the day of that exam. If we were to do it beforehand, we get checked by Trafford, we'd be done for maladministration. Not that we would ever dare do it in a million years, but when they arrive at school, we've got to keep them locked up, which is the whole other story because Mr. Morgan hides the key. But there's time for that story later, perhaps. So yeah, we don't get to see the papers until we open them in front of the children that very day. So they're from the government, DFE, the STA, they're not made by us. And it can be a variety of things. On the reading test, we've had potatoes, we've had pandas, bees. It sounds really random. And in the maths, 1 year we stumped the children, even though they've already been doing degrees, rotation, all of that kind of thing. They had a diver coming off a board. They think of these weird and wonderful ways to present these things to our children. So we're trying to facilitate going down every sort of avenue to make sure that they're prepared for everything. Right, let's see if this works now. Why does the arrow never work? Oh, here we go. It does work now. So yeah, the standardized assessment test and it's evidence for writing. Okay, so the writing is different. The process in writing begins in September. What we do is we create a portfolio for the children. Now, I've been banging on about this in September. They just won't look in their English books. They'll look in the science books. They'll look in the extensive writing books. They get a good picture of what the children, and when I say they, it's the moderators. We initially assess the children and we put forward their expected or greater depth or has not met, which sounds like a horrific term. And we really, really do safeguard the children against that term. And that portfolio of writing is then judged by us and then externally moderated as well. So we get lots of pieces of writing with lots of different things in it, but handwriting is pivotal in there and spelling. Okay, if a child's absent this SATS week, it's very rare. We've never had it. We've had broken arms, but we've never had a child absent this SATS week. If it is and they are really, really, really poorly, or maybe just really poorly, you let us know ASAP, so as soon as possible in the morning, because what we'll have to do is apply for a timetable variation. Okay, but it's never happened, but we're prepared for it if it does. They take them during normal school hours under exam conditions, and they're getting good at practicing that. They're not allowed to talk to each other, obviously. Also, we could be moderated by Trafford for that. They could be coming around to have a look at how we're administering the tests. When they're completed, they get sent away. So they're not ours, they get sent away and they are marked externally. We don't get those results until July. And I've just had some paperwork today, which says that the results in July are delayed because of the King's coronation. So it's going to be later this year. And what we tend to do is we tell the children on the day when we receive them what they got, because if we were to send that letter home and say, for instance, we've got a child that has not met, we're not doing that to that child. We look at their progress and we give them that result, how much they've progressed in that term, because we don't want any child going home. And if you receive that, you're going to say, oh, well, what's this? If we need to give them the story behind what they've got so they feel good about themselves, because they should not be feeling stressed at the ages of 10 and 11. The results are sent to school. And then here is a breakdown of the times of the test. We'll go into that in more detail when we talk about the separate subjects. So there, again, what I said, they're marked externally, and there's a national standard set. There's something called a scale score. Don't worry too much about that. I'll show you what the pass marks were last year. So here we have the reading, maths and GPS. As I said, writing is assessed throughout the year. To get expected was 58 out of 110 in maths and 96 for greater depth. Now, it says higher standard there. That's what it will come back to you as. It won't actually say GD for maths or reading. It only says GD for writing. But higher standard is anything greater than 96 in maths in this year. For reading, it was 29 I expected and 41. As you can see, these GD scores, these higher scores, there's not room for error. There's not much room for error at all. And when you're thinking about the speed in which the children are working, it's difficult. And in GPS, it was 55 out of 70. That was a particular hard year. Now, we can't predict what that will be. We can't predict what that will be this year. But each year it changes. When the SATS first changed in 2016, when they upped the game of SATS in terms of what the children needed to know, the application, it was 19 out of 50 for an expected mark, which just seems crazy now. It's jumped to 10 marks. Same for GD. So it varies each year. If the nation does well, the pass mark goes up. if the nation does poorly, which we all hope for, the pass mark goes down. So it's all dependent about how the other schools in the country are doing as well. I hope that helps. You can kind of see what they're kind of up against. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Sometimes it works, the arrow, and sometimes it really doesn't and just sticks. There we go. So spelling, punctuation and grammar, that's the first test they have, and they quite like that one. It eases them in. It used to be the reading test first, and it's like, oh. So it eases them in because they're quite quick to answer, especially the first few questions. They're quite straightforward, taken from probably year 2-3 syllabus. They're really, really working hard on some real random vocabulary, subjunctive form, relative clauses, relative pronouns, really, really tricky things that they've got to get their head around. So we try to do that through song, through remembering random Beyonce words, or something about zombies as well. So if your children are talking about that at home, it's good that they're talking about it. And it may seem random to you, but it works. It's just those memory triggers for a concept that's usually really, really hard. I'm sorry, I've just admitted someone, and now I'm just flicking through. Right, so it consists of 2 papers. So the first one is all about spelling, punctuation and grammar. Now I say that it's about spelling because even though they're answering about a grammatical feature, put point in a sentence, which when it acts as a verb, put point in a sentence that acts as a noun, even though, bear with, just someone's off mute, thank you, even though the children are writing it and they're looking at the grammar part, they'll still assess the spelling. So we're trying to get through to the children when it comes to the GPS, the grammar, punctuation, spelling test. Even if it isn't the spelling test, the grammar bit, you have to spell it right. So don't use elaborate sentences, because we want the children to be safe, and choose quite simple sentences to show the grammatical thank you feature. Yeah, that's a good one. But we do all that in school. And then we have examples here. Insert a relative pronoun, explain how the comma changes the meaning of the second sentence. And that's quite a lot of work for 1 mark as well. So in fact, you've got to work hard just for 1 mark. So sometimes you've got like 4 things right to get that 1 mark. And there are the answers. And then we have the spelling test. The spelling test is in context. Obviously, if you've got a homophone, the children need to know which red they're going to be spelling. The spelling test gets progressively harder. And what we tell the children, and if you reiterate it at home as well, please, is not to join their handwriting. Once it's sent off to those examiners, we understand their handwriting pattern because we've seen it all year. Examiner can't tell between an I and an E. We'll know what it is. The examiner will not. Remember that it's not being marked by us, it's marked externally. Oh, and now I'm going to pass you over to Ms. Barlow, our resident expert in reading.
Hello. Right. Let me just make sure I can see the screen. Okay, so then we go on to, on the second day, they'll be doing a reading test. So it lasts it's the longest one, it lasts for 60 minutes. This is just, it's designed to measure if their comprehension of age-appropriate text meet the national standards. So there are always 3 texts in this. So we've really been speaking to the children about the fact that, I mean, an hour seems quite a long time, but it's not when they've got 3 texts to read. So it's a combination of non-fiction and fiction, and then poetry. Now, it could have poetry. Last year there was no poetry on there, so we're wondering whether that might come up this year. So we've been practicing with the children to make sure that they're spending about 20 minutes on each section. So they'll have to read the full text, answer all those questions, and then we're sort of saying, like, when it was the marks, right, you've had 20 minutes, where are you up to? Are you moving on to the next text? So there's a lot for them to do in this time. Now, poetry, or there's 2 sides to it really. We're sort of hoping that there might be some poetry this year, because that means usually less words to read, so it gives them a little bit more time. But then poetry can be quite tricky, because all about the author's intent, the language, is lots of imagery used, and there's a meaning coming through in the poem that the children have to figure out. So we've been doing a lot of poetry. We're actually doing poetry all this week as well. So let me see, I can't move on to the next. Let's see if it'll let me move Oh, here we go. So there are lots of areas, the content domains that will be covered in the text. There's some come up more than others, so I'll talk to you about that in a minute, just so that you know maybe what to focus on at home if you're listening to your child read and what questions to be asking. But I'll just go through what will be covered. So there are they have to give or explain the meaning of words in context. So that's really we do a lot of work in class on vocabulary, expanding their vocabulary so that they'll know a wide variety of vocabulary. But we've been giving them strategies and tips to figure out the meaning of words if they don't quite know it. So it's about reading around the word, read the line before, the line after, sometimes further down the paragraph to figure out what that might mean. So that will come up, as well as retrieving and recording information. So this is our retrieval, where they'll skim and they'll scan through the text to find something that's explicitly written in the text, and they're just going to lift that out. So, let me just pop somebody in mute there. Yeah. So there will be that they come up a lot, the retrieval questions, and they've been honing their skills on this. They're very good at it. Then next is some summary, so they might have to summarize main ideas from more than one paragraph. So that could be summarizing or sequencing. These come up less in the texts, so they might get one question maybe on summary through the whole text, but it's a good skill to have for them to have, because they can gain a good few marks from these. So we've got also making inferences from the text. So with these inferences, this is less as in retrieval, where they're explicitly told and they're lifted from the text. With inference, then they're going to have to pick up clues from the text. It's not specifically said, but it might be implied. So they're looking for clues. Now they've been given lots of strategies to infer on a text, but we've talked a lot about the fact that, as well as the clues in the text, they need to activate their prior knowledge. So what wider experiences do they have that will help them in these inferences? So last year there was a paper on the circus. So for the wider experience, have they been to a circus? Have they read a book where the character went to a circus? How did the character feel when they went there? What was happening? Was it all bustling and busy? Have they watched a programme on it? Have they seen a circus when they've gone past even the Trafford Centre, when there's sometimes them set up? So it's not just clues in the text, it's actually their wider knowledge as well. So we're always talking to them about activate your prior knowledge. What do you already know? What do you already know? And to help them visualise it. It always helps they can visualise it in their minds. Those questions come up a lot. I'll just show you in a second on the next slide. They'll also be predicting what might happen. So it's like these sensible predictions from what's said, so more retrieval, but sometimes from what's implied, like the inference questions. They'll also have to identify and explain how information or the narrative content is related and contributes to meaning. So again, I mean, that leads on to the next one, where they identify and explain how meaning is enhanced through choice of words and phrases. The author, we always talk to them about the fact that the author intent is always there. They don't just pick random words. They've specified these words for a reason, and they're trying to convey a meaning or a message. So we've been doing lots of work on that. And then the final content domain would be comparison. So they're making comparisons within the text. So that could be the same character, how they felt at the beginning versus how they felt at the end, or throughout the text when different events happen or occur. But it could be comparisons of different characters. That character seemed loving and caring. This another character seemed very strict and cold. It could be comparisons towards buildings, settings, lots of different things. So they've been working on that as well. So if we have a little look, we'll come back to the amounts of sort of how those questions are weighted afterwards. So this is from a 2019 test. It was what is really useful, which I always sort of remind them, at the top of the paper, you'll see here, it says questions 1 to 13 are about the park on pages 4 and 5. So they'll always be advised where to look to find the answer. It will always say, because sometimes you might be asking a question and they might waste time looking back through the entire text to try and find what they need, but they just need to be able to read these instructions really carefully and not to panic, just to say, right, it's telling me to look on page 4, that's where I'm going to look. And it will be even more specific. It might say, look at the paragraphs beginning and give the words at the beginning. And even this week, we've been going on our review cycle with the children. They've been testing and reviewing in very small groups so we can go through it with them. That's what we've been talking about, the fact that it's telling you where to look to find your answer. So don't lose track of that in the moment. And this one, what is AJ doing when the post arrives? You'll see it's worth 1 mark and it is a retrieval. It's there on the text to the right that you can see. But there are different, they will accept more than one. So AJ was just about to tuck into his tea and toast. So if the children say he was just eating his breakfast, that's fine, they'll accept that. But you could just lift it from the text, tuck into his tea and toast, having his breakfast or drinking tea. All of them are accepted for this 1 mark answer. Oh, sorry.
You know what? Who
they'll throw random things in. We keep speaking to the children about the fact that they'll do lots of random vocabulary or tricks to sort of make you focus on the wrong thing. Here, he was eating his breakfast. And that's all it was. Okay, so it happened last year on the text last year. The 3rd text last year was really tricky, and I think it's set in the Victorian times. And there was a couple of words in there that we thought, what is that? But we could figure it out from reading around it on the text and think, oh, it must have been something to do. I think it was a windowsill or skirting board, hole in a skirting board in the Victorian times. And really, there were no questions about that, but they were just popping in this vocabulary to try and trip them up. They're very so here, this was on the same text, 2019. It was the next text, sorry, non-fiction. And it was about bumblebees. So here, I can see somebody's raised their hand. If it would be possible, I think at the very end, we just keep hold of that. At the end, we're going to answer lots of questions about these. Thank you. So this is non-fiction. Sometimes we're looking non-fiction where you can see subheadings here. So if it says, in what way is buzz pollination more useful than other forms of pollination? And you can see at the bottom, again, there are sometimes more than one answer children can give to get the right mark. But we're looking some non-fictions where they've got subheadings. So we keep saying to the children, look at key words in the question. So if you scan for the keyword buzz pollination, now you're going to go to your text and skim and scan and find that keyword. And in that section, you're going to find your answer. So on this one, so these are the tricky words. If you can see, it's worth 3 marks, this one. So this again was on the same year, 2019. It was called Music Box. It was quite tricky, the final. And we do find that the final text is usually the most tricky. So here it says, what impressions do you get of Piper's house? Now you can see, if you see this, the box, impression and evidence, we work on this a lot with the children. So impressions are your points that you're making. So we talk to the children about first impressions. That seems to get them to think about what this actually is asking them to do. What first impression did you have when you first met me? What did you think of me? And now these impressions might change along time of getting to know me, like it might change within a text. At the start, you might have an impression of a character, and towards the end, that might have changed. And this is actually impressions of a building, what impressions you get of it. So we've been working with the children to have this bank ready, the personality traits for characters. Are they fun? Are they boring? Are they adventurous? Are they brave? Are they strict? Are they caring? And have these banks ready, because that's your impression, they're your points. And then all they need to do is find evidence on the text to match it. They're brave because they went out riding. We read a text a while ago about riding a giraffe in a safari park, and that was the evidence that she was brave, because usually you wouldn't jump on a giraffe and ride at night. So we're following this pattern of making a point, the impression, and then backing it up with evidence. So it's point, evidence, which your children might say to you, Pepe. So we've been going over and over that, and we know that doing that, you will be given 2 points, 2 bits of evidence, and you will get your full 3 marks. Sorry, a little message has just popped. Just gonna click that off. So with this one, there were lots, if you can see on the right, there are lots of acceptable points. So as long as they can back up their points with evidence, they are fine. So here it says it's old, it's tiny, it's cozy, it's uncluttered, it's old-fashioned. All of those points, they only have to find 2 with 2 bits of evidence there. Okay, so going on to what I said before about how they're weighted, some questions like the sequencing or the summary questions, they might only come up once in a text. But here, on the 2019 SATS paper, for example, 12% of marks could be gained for answering questions involving explaining the meaning of words in context. So that's why we've been doing lots, every single lesson of reading, we start with vocabulary, we're working on it, we're figuring out using strategies that we've learned how to go through the text and work out meaning of words, because obviously in the SATS they will not have access to the dictionary to find out. But the majority of marks can be gained through retrieval questions. So you can help, so if your children are reading at home with you, or just while you're cooking, they might be reading at you, and you could be asking the question, oh, where did you find that? You know, what time of day did they say that was? These like explicit things that were said in the text, they just need to be practicing, and reading every day will build up this, because they need the fluency to be able to get through the text in time. But they also need that practice of retrieval skills, so that gets them a lot of marks in the test. And then below that, 36% of marks can also be gained from the inference questions. This is again why we say, if you've not ever been to the place that's talking about, or you can't visualize it, think back to maybe a friend went there and has told you about it, maybe you've read it in a book, maybe you've seen it on the news. Anything we can do to activate our prior knowledge and visualize it in our head really, really helps, as well as looking for clues in the text. All of these inference questions, they have to be backed up with evidence from the text as well. Okay. Right, we're just going to move on to maths for you now. So I'm going to turn you around to Miss Flaw.
Sorry, just to say.
Oh yeah. So there's only 7 minutes left. So if it does log you out, just log back in and we'll just exit you straight away. So we're going to move on to maths now. So there's 3 different maths tests. On the Thursday, there's arithmetic, which is 30 minutes. And then the children will have a short break, have some water, and then they'll do the reasoning test, paper 2, which is 40 minutes. And then on the Friday, they'll do the final test, which is paper 3, which is reasoning as well, which is also 40 minutes. Okay, so the maths arithmetic paper has a total of 40 marks. Let's see if I could just move this, I can read that properly. So it covers the 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, BIDMAS, percentages of amounts, and calculating with decimals and fractions. So all the topics in the arithmetic and the reasoning is everything we've done in class. There'll be nothing new on there. We're doing arithmetic starters every day. We do an arithmetic lesson every week, and the same with the reasoning. So the arithmetic test, there are some 1-mark questions and some 2-mark questions as well. So this is an example of a 2-marker where the children they'll gain 2 marks if they've got the correct answer. But if they do have an incorrect answer, but they show the right method, and maybe they've just made a small mistake with the method, then they will get a mark for their working out. So we always really encourage them to make sure that they're really clear with the method and always show they're working out. Okay, so then these are just some example questions of the arithmetic paper. So there's some inverse questions, a BIDMAS question there. We always encourage them to write down BIDMAS so they can see which order they need to do the calculation. Decimal questions as well. So with the arithmetic paper, there's 40 marks available, but there's only 30 minutes. So some questions maybe at the beginning of the paper, we encourage them to solve mentally if they can, just because so they don't run out of time. And then there's just the answers. And then here are some more examples. These are towards the end of the paper. So as throughout the paper, the questions do get more difficult. Question 25, you can see there is a long division question, 888 divided by 37. So for the children who maybe struggle a little bit with time and seem to run out of time, we always say if you see long division, come back to it at the end, because it can take a long time to answer those questions. Okay, and then this is the reasoning paper. So paper 2 and paper 3, these both have a total of 35 marks each. And there's lots of different topics, so number, place value, Roman numerals, 4 operations, geometry, measurement, algebra, ratio, proportion, fractions, decimals and percentages. So you can see that there's a lot of content in there. But like I said before, there'll be nothing new on there. We're at the point now in maths where we've basically covered everything and we're just going over, recapping and revising everything that we've already learned. So I think these are just a couple of 1 mark examples from the reasoning paper, and then just the answers. And then moving on to question 18. So this is where they've got to circle the prime number, but then explain how they know the other numbers aren't prime. So it's just explaining the reasoning, which is something they've been doing throughout all of Key Stage 2. And also we really encourage them to be really specific with the answer and give an example to talk about factors or multiples. And then these are just 2 more questions, which are 1 mark. So there are some 1 markers in the reasoning paper as well. And then the final one here, this is a 3 mark question, and this is towards the end. So like I said before, the questions do get harder as the paper goes on. So this is a multi-step word problem. So they'll have to do a few different operations. So it might be a division and a multiplication and an addition. But it's 3 marks and it clearly says there to show you method. So like I said, even if they do get the answer wrong, they might still be able to gain a couple of marks for the working out. So that's really important. And then that's it for maths.
Right, so what could you do to help support your child through the SATS? So firstly, a positive attitude goes a long way, and that's so true, and there's so much research on that. You know, a child's belief in that they can do it really does have an impact on whether they can do it or not. So as much encouragement and support as you can. I know we don't need to tell you that, you're obviously doing that at home, and it's really important not to overload them and think, oh, the more they do, the better they're gonna. Obviously there's a time and a place for it, but just kind of doing it ad hoc. You know, don't sit them down every night to do it. They've literally been sat down all day with us, and they've gone through, honestly, the morning is so long for them, but there's an hour and a half, and they'll have gone through a lesson with me, a lesson with Michelle, and a lesson with Laura. And then in the afternoon, they've gone through another 3 lessons. This afternoon, they've had music, computing, and PE. So they've had a really, really busy day. So it's like short spurts, and what you can do to help without like applying the pressure or any stress, which I'm sure you're not anyway. Try not to use the past papers that are on the FE website or the STA. They're the papers that we use, the past SATs, 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016. They're all the ones that we use, and the one that from last year, 2022, because then that gives us guidance and how we can support it. So say they've been doing them at home, don't worry if they have it, you know, it's happened. And then they do it here, we then think they're okay. Obviously we're using formative assessment all the time, not just summative assessment, but it kind of paints a picture for us. I've got less than 1 minute, so you will have to log back in a minute as soon as it cuts out, but I'll keep speaking until then. Attend any meetings, thank you, you're here. We'll send some more literature home in terms of the timetable and other bits like revision aids. Talk to the class teacher if you've got any concerns or worries about your child. You know, we really are approachable. We're here, you know, it's a partnership. So doors always open, or dojo message. encourage your child to speak to us or a trusted adult school if they're feeling any anxieties. I really hope they're not. You know, we always say to them, the only person that should be anxious or worried is us. It's not you. You're 10 and 11. So we try to make sure that we are reducing that, and that this is their time to shine. It's to prove what they've learned.